I am Holly Glasgow. I'm at Shelton State Community College. I'm a little bit different in the community college world. Um, I am the director of child development here. We have two pre-K units on site, so I have 36 4-year-olds and 4 teachers for that endeavor. We have about 150 to 200 college kids at any given time. And then I also do what I'm going to talk about today, which is on the workforce side of life for non-credit training. And somewhere in there, I do advising as well. So juggling lots of hats. So if somebody pops in my door with a kid, you might have to just like breathe for a moment while we get them settled. But otherwise, I think we should be good. It is nap time here. Last I heard, everybody was asleep. I too would be on a cot if they would let me. It is the after lunch session. So I definitely know that we're all going to be a little bit drowsy, but I think you can do this. I'm going to share my screen here momentarily. I'm also going to tell you I talk very fast. So if something flies by you and you need me to repeat it, just let me know. And if you don't mind kind of monitoring that chat, I'm not good at multitasking that. And then I will try to get finished in enough time to answer all of your questions, all of that good kind of stuff. And you'll have my contact information if you've got any longer questions. Awesome. So if you noticed, the name for our program is a little bit long sometimes. So part of that comes because I really wanted just the first half, the Community Childcare Cultivator. We realized pretty quickly that there were a couple of other agencies in our state that went by C3 or 3C. And so the branding people came out, they're like, yeah, you can't do that. So instead we get a much longer name and we then refer to it often as 3x3. So anytime I'm actually talking about it, you'll get that short abbreviation. I'm going to give you basic information and then we'll jump in. If my screen is going to play nice, there we go. All right, my contact information, you are welcome to scan this QR code. When you do that, it's going to pop up and give you a couple of different things. This little button over here, the download button will let you save that directly to your contacts. But you'll also notice this first link will link you to a handout that will follow along kind of with where we are today, hopefully. In part because it does have some statistics and that good kind of stuff, which I always like scribble furiously in sessions I attend and then can't read or don't know what they relate to. So that is there for you guys. Hopefully makes mostly sense. It looks like this. If you get to this screen, when you press the button, you'll know you are in the right place. I definitely work with young children. 4-year-olds are my favorite. So if I have a turn of phrase that's a little bit odd, a little bit different from really what you would hear when you're having a typical conversation about workforce, keep in mind that oftentimes my workforce is talking to children. So we are a little different around here. One of the things, though, that we're hearing, and I was really excited, honestly, to sit through in the second session, some kind of workforce outreach stuff with Michael, is that our communities are telling us very loudly and very clearly that we need more childcare, and in particular, we need more high quality childcare. There is some availability for childcare available in our state that is open at this time. Typically what we're seeing with those openings is maybe not the best quality. So what that looks like in our state, we have just under 300,000 children under the age of 5 in the state of Alabama. That honestly, we know that there's a little bit of population shift. It stayed pretty close, honestly, through there, in part because we did get a whole rash of COVID babies. While people were home and bored, we had a whole generation of children birthed from their hobbies. So when we're looking at kind of what we consider to be universal care, which is really what we want, what we know kind of provides the best means for start of school, and really longevity, that's not a word, we're going to make it one, through even high school is about 70 to 75% of our children should be in some type of childcare. That does leave us a little bit of room for those families that do prefer to stay home, have extended family, all of that good kind of stuff. Basically, what that means is that Alabama needs just over 200,000 childcare spots. We have about 125,000. So anytime we're talking about childcare and somebody says, I'm on every waiting list imaginable, yes, yes, you are. My own children are 18 and 20, getting ready to be 19. And I'm pretty sure that there are some childcare lists that they're still on somewhere, because there's just not enough of them. Knowing what that gap looks like, that is also assuming that every single spot that we have is full. That would assume that it is within the price range that our parents can manage, that location it matches, that it matches the hours of their work and all kinds of other things. So to say that we in Alabama have a shortage, we definitely know that that is the case. What that means for our workforce is that about 38,000 children have had a parent leave the workforce to stay home because there is no childcare. So when we're talking about the non-participation rate, we know that there are typically 3 barriers to that: childcare, transportation, and affordable housing. Childcare is a massive one. To say the least, it is really, really hard to kind of bang the drum and say, we're doing this hiring event, we're going to hire 500 people, and 1,200 show up, all of them apply. And then when you actually go to start calling and training and all of that, what we're hearing is that our employers are getting feedback that, oh, I can't make it then, I don't have anybody to keep my child. Or even if their children are a little bit older and in school, they can't be there before or after those typical school hours of 8 to 2:30. So really, when we're looking at childcare, it is much larger than just an issue with childcare. It is a workforce issue. It is one that, again, I have lots of thoughts and feelings about, because it is my life's work. But I think it's of importance to note that when we all went back to work post-pandemic, the very first people to return to work were childcare providers. And while many of our jobs were seeing that increase of startup cost and pay, childcare did not. Many of our childcare centers opened, and then our other industries went back to work on the backs of employees making $7.50 to $8 an hour. So it is definitely a challenge. There have been some state incentives to kind of work towards leveling that out to some degree, but kind of in its existence, childcare was always designed as a market rate failure. There's no way that parents can pay more, and there's no way that centers can pay their people more, and then center owners are still not making any money. So it is a very kind of convoluted issue, which leads us, I think, to where some of our answers kind of lie with some of that. But we also know that Alabama in and of itself is not the only one having this problem. It is a nationwide problem. We know nationwide we're about 5 million spots short. So when we talk about some of our sister states who are kind of headhunting some of our workforce population, the same is happening for childcare. If they can move in with a relative in another state, their housing cost is now diminished, then they're willing to take a childcare job, even if it's making the same amount of money per hour, because something else is different. So largely it is a problem. COVID, bless it, there's really no other words you can kind of put around that other than that very, Southern, like, bless your heart. I'm so terrible that we had to deal with that. But it did leave us with some spotlights, honestly, on childcare and education. If you were like me as a parent, there were definitely days I needed my own children, to go back to school. I needed our house back in order. But on top of that, when people left the workforce with COVID, We saw just a whole generation really not return because they did have young children. So we got articles like this one that we know parents are missing from our field, and not just our field, but all of them. And that we're really not seeing a ton of improvement with that. There's a reason for that. The pandemic definitely shone a light on any of the places where we had supply gap issues, right? I'm still mad at some people like over the way they acted about toilet paper. It was a supply gap issue. Childcare in all of its glory is really one of those things that has continued to suffer a supply gap issue, particularly when we're looking at non-standard hours. And that is a huge part of what we see in our state for workforce. When we're looking at manufacturing, education, and healthcare, add in forestry and trucking to that, many of our people are not working a standard 8 to 5. So finding childcare outside of that continues to be a worsening kind of problem. We also know that we saw a closure of about 10% of childcare programs through COVID. I think Michelle was part of the crew, like trying to track everybody down during COVID. We literally had no way to do that other than pulling up our list of childcare and just calling people. But we saw about a 9 to 10% loss. And in the state of Alabama, that means we lost about 11,000 spots. That's already being short, 200,000. And now we're kind of cutting the bottom out of that even a little bit more. But we also know that childcare in and of itself is also a huge financial burden to the tune of almost $100 billion in our US economy. There are lots and lots of reasons why, in part because we are the only industrialized nation who does not subsidize childcare for everybody, not just those who are considered to be below the poverty rate. We don't want our families falling below that rate just to be able to qualify for childcare assistance. But we see it all of the time. We see people who are turning down a promotion or a raise because it cuts them out of their social benefits. So really kind of juggling that continues to be a problem. And we wind up with a field that very much feels like this, quite honestly, where regardless of how many fires we've put out, there's always something else on the horizon that we're fighting against. Right now, I'll be really, really honest and tell you that education and childcare as a whole is a really scary place right now. Many of you know that. We don't really know where the deregulation will end and what systems it will kind of leave us with, and which ones it's going to gut and which ones we're just going to have to kind of struggle through. It will be, I think, an interesting place to kind of figure out where we are kind of as we continue to walk the path that we're on. I'm going to try really hard to keep my political opinions out of that. It's real hard for me though. I'm definitely not a shy and retiring personality. So really when we get into a situation that looks and feels like this, we wind up back, to use a term that many that have been in our field for a while will understand, we wind up back at a nation at risk. A nation at risk was in those kind of 50s and 60s while we're going through all of the civil rights things, also looking at why some of our communities were not kind of thriving. We got things out of it like Head Start, which is a huge piece of the childcare landscape, facing lots of issues right now. So we really have worked ourselves back into being in trouble and being vulnerable to our working population not being able to continue because we don't have care for our nation's kind of youngest and most vulnerable populations. So I will tell you the same thing that I tell teachers when we kind of start talking through this and we're spiraling. We're going to take a brief pre-K pause. We're going to do some deep breathing. That is the only way we get through our day here. I will tell you, there are days that feels like we're hyperventilating because we're having to take so many deep breaths. That is the nature of working with children, but it's also the nature in working with a workforce that, again, is a bit unstable. So what we know, all of that is essentially what we consider to be our problem. How are we addressing childcare? How do we make it more manageable? How do we make it more successful? How do we make it more accessible? both for providers and for our families as they need it. Well, our thoughts on that is business and industry continues to tell us that they need more employees. If they are serious about needing more employees, or being able to send the ones they have back for after hours training, whatever the case may be, they've got to come to the table. What we're seeing right now is our government is not going to help us, right? They're not going to subsidize anything that they absolutely don't have to right now. So if we're going to see childcare be successful, in large part driving workforce to be successful, then commerce has got to come to the table. And I will say, I am very, very lucky to be in the region that I am in. I absolutely adore my works leader here. I will say not everybody feels that way about him. He is a turd half of the time. I tell him that all of the time. He tells me the same thing. It's fine. We do great work together. It is very much like having a brother kind of in our world. We also have children who are the same age and went kindergarten to 12th grade together. So I called him, and I've been calling him for about 10 years, literally since our children started kindergarten, to say, hey, Donnie, guess what? You have a childcare problem. He's like, Holly, I don't have a childcare problem. No, I promise you have a childcare problem. It might not hit you yet, but you have a childcare problem. Along comes COVID, and he calls. Hey, Holly, I have a childcare problem. Yeah, you do. How are you going to fix it? And the answer was, well, we don't know. How do we fix it? And so at that time, we really started sitting down, having really, really hard conversations, really honest conversations where you could come to the table as long as you didn't get your feelings hurt too easily. Because I will hold your hand, but I'm also going to hurt your feelings at the same time. Because the reality is, it is a commerce issue at this point. So all of us kind of sitting around the table decided there has to be a way that our specific community can come together in a way that kind of provides this equitable approach where new providers can come on board, but no one industry is really shouldering all of that. Because as we know, even in their success, nobody really wants to turn all of their profit over to you for something that they really don't understand. So this kind of shows you a little bit about some of the partners at that table. We, of course, at Shelton State, our chamber, our West Alabama Works, Alabama DHR, and I will tell you right now, and I tell them this all the time, so it's not news to them, I would not have attempted this work 10 years ago. The Department of Human Resources has made updates. They're still continuing to make updates. It is definitely not a perfect system, but they know the same things that we do, that they need more people working in childcare and we need a steady workforce. The Paths for Success Foundation, which is the Alabama Community Colleges foundation for fundraising, and then the Women's Foundation of Alabama, United Way, and WIOA. I can kind of toot our horn just a little bit for WIOA. We were the only place in the U.S. that was using WIOA funds for childcare. We are a high needs career, but we're not a high wage career. So typically childcare does not qualify for WIOA benefits. Even though they have people who need jobs and we have jobs, we don't qualify for WIOA. So the governor's office was willing to listen to us, honestly, and try it. And so again, very thankful for the partners who kind of came and sat at the table with us. And there's been some that have come and gone that they decided, no, that's really not the conversation for them at this time or ever, or whatever the case may be. That's okay. You're going to have those issues anytime you're building out a new team or a new process. There's going to be some people it just doesn't fit. So as we kind of sit around the table, we were very much, again, looking at childcare, housing, and transportation. Unfortunately, those are the things that stand in everybody's way. I have one going to pharmacy school in the fall, and housing right now is a real scary thing. He's a student. He can't afford a $400,000 house, right? Well, our families, particularly with little people, cannot either. And particularly not close to where a majority of the jobs are. So we really kind of through that process came up with what we decided was at least part of the answer. Our reality is we know good and well that it's not all of the answer. We're never going to be able to host all of the answer out of one sitting, um, because there are just going to be communities with different needs. There's going to be different funding opportunities. There's all kinds of things that change. That's not new to any of you. So for us, really sitting down and building out what this looks like, what our providers are telling us that they need, and then what our business and industry is telling us that they need in support of them. What our providers are telling us for new, particularly family childcare homes, which is where our focus is. In my first cohort, there were 12 participants. 11 of them had attempted the process independently and had been unable to complete the process because it is so paperwork heavy, so rules and policy heavy that they just could not navigate it by themselves. So we looked at what we call our community childcare cultivator. And in fairness, the bottom line is important, even though I don't always love it, connecting commerce to care, because again, our commerce generators have to come to the table and be willing to work with us. So in our program, it has all of these components. I'm going to give you very, very brief overviews of them if we have time. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on it though, because I would rather you have time to ask questions, if that makes sense. Because I think sometimes that's an easier way to digest all of the things that are a piece of this program in particular. So for the plan with our program, when they come to me, they get just over 80 hours of training. 24 of those hours are the hours that DHR requires for licensure. There are 6 different categories that they have to have 4 hours each in. They get all of that. And then I think the more important part is the supportive application process. They have to have things like a fire marshal visit. They have to have a planning and zoning letter, depending on where they are, a business license that may or may not include a health department inspection. So there are all kinds of processes that just a normal person, I will tell you, is not going to be super successful at if they don't have some experience kind of navigating some of that. So our role in that is to kind of hold their hand through that process, check all of the boxes. We also spend some time connecting them to auxiliary programs and supports. So if they want to go back to school, there are programs like Teach. There is the Childcare and Leadership Scholarship that is DHR and ACCS linked. There's the CDA process. But then there are also our CC&Rs, our Childcare Resource and Referrals, who provide materials and ongoing training, all kinds of things. And then in addition, some business supports for keeping books, for advertising, for social media. So we spend a good number of sessions kind of connecting them to some of that. We do supportive home visits. By the time DHR comes for a licensing visit, I have been in their home somewhere between 3 and 5, sometimes as many as 10. Those are the homes we're really struggling in, oftentimes because they have space limitations, and we're trying to figure out a way to kind of make it the most organized version. Not that the person is unsuccessful, but they need to kind of walk it and make sure it's going to fit for their family. And sometimes it doesn't. We have to go back in and kind of reconfigure things. We do connect them back in with our local chamber, but we also have them pop in to some things like our cluster meetings. So when we have a construction cluster meeting, and I'm hearing those same things from those foremen, hey, I need more people, I need more people, I need more people. It's not uncommon for me to say, well, you've got a hiring event. When you hire, don't forget this person is located near where your home base is. They have this number of childcare spots. So we are going both from the business side down, from the provider up. So we go both directions there. Ongoing business training, because man, business licenses and all of that fun stuff. I will tell you, I've learned a lot about that process. We do some supportive writing as well. They do have to have policies and procedures specifically written to meet DHR's expectations. They have a very set list of what must be included. And until you've tried to write that, it can be a little bit challenging. It is one of the things that scares people away from the process. In part because many of them are just uncomfortable with writing a formal document. So we spend some sessions writing. We have a handful of templates, that kind of stuff. We'd spend some time then in curriculum and lesson planning, as well as some make and take sessions, so that once children are with them, that they are providing high quality care in a way that gets them ready for kindergarten. That's always our kind of next step. That's in part because we know what the benefits of high quality childcare are. And I'm going to give you the numbers and I'll tell you why I think they're super important. So nationally, the return on investment for childcare, if it is high quality, is about $1 spent for a $7 return. The state of Alabama, it's a little bit higher. It's estimated around $13 to $15 of an investment return there. It leads to children being able to complete K-12 without repeating a grade. Less often are they referred for special education services. They're less likely to have major attendance issues. They're more likely to graduate on time and then roll into one of three things after that: employment, additional education, or enlistment. And then they're also long-term more likely to own their own home and their own transportation. So when we really look at those three workforce barriers, childcare, homes, and transportation, if we start and we really follow it all the way through, high quality childcare has the ability to really affect all three of those. It's not going to affect it tomorrow, unfortunately, but it does at least give us a version of an approach. Again, not all of the answers by any stretch of the imagination, but it does give us a means to at least begin some of those conversations and shifts. So one of the things, and I kind of just breezed over it, we really have focused our efforts on family childcare homes because homes, one, are a smaller kind of chunk. Licensing standards for centers get a little bit crazy when we get into architecture and sprinkler systems and all of that insanity. But homes also give us this ability to look at extended hours in a way that is more favorable. If I am working overnight and I need somebody to watch my child, I am much more likely to continue that if they're still going to bed in a bedroom and they're still having breakfast at the kitchen table, which has really kind of been why our focus has been homes, because it does match kind of that extended schedule or sometimes even the shifting schedule. For us, we have contact with our fire department. Our local fire department has a social worker on site because they do have super, super stressful, traumatic jobs, but then their families are also at risk because they work for 24 hours and they're off for 48. So we have relationships with them to say, okay, if you have a child who only needs care 1 out of every 3 days, well, do you have anybody on any of your other shifts that might pick up one of those other 2 days? It keeps us able to kind of be a little bit more flexible about the children that we're reaching and the families that we're reaching without feeling like we're putting too much of a strain on our providers to take children who are part-time where really they need full-time attendees. The other kind of piece that we're weaving in just a little bit more often now is also our QRS system, which is our quality rating enhancement system in the state of Alabama. They are eligible for up to 5 stars. Star 1 is licensure, so once they're licensed, they're immediately a Star 1. But with that comes an annual payout, and the higher the star rating, the higher the payout. So again, making it a little bit more sustainable for our providers. So I know that's a really, really quick and dirty overview of a program that is a bit more complicated than that and a problem that is definitely super prevalent. But I wanted to get enough time so that if you guys had questions, I could get to those instead of languishing in the world of slides.